Today marks an important day as we are reading a political article about Nikki Haley, and it is her time for choosing. Now, this refers to President Reagan's speech from, I believe, 1964, where he endorsed President Goldwater. Well, not president, but presidential candidate Barry Goldwater. In 1964, he had made it an important thing to announce his support for the candidacy because it added legitimacy. Now, she has a time for choosing, as Nikki Haley has, for example, been state representative, I believe, in South Carolina, congresswoman, I think, governor, and then now UN ambassador. So she has been in a position where she's establishmentarian but also pro-Trump. Now it's a time for choosing which way will she go, right? So you can see this being very obvious. This is a very long-term, lengthy article talking about how she is going to run for president in 2024 now. So let's keep this going. Okay. She resigned in 2018, for example, so she did jump ship pretty early on. But let's keep in mind all the background that was going on, right? So, for example, somebody was writing about this and said, I asked Nikki Haley whether or not she thought that whether she had attempted to persuade the president that he was wrong about the election being rigged, that he had lost legitimately. She said no. When he was talking about that, I didn't address it. So see, she's not correcting him on the election fraud because she doesn't even care. She just wants him to dig his own ditch because she's not actually there to help him, okay? Keep this in mind. Alright? Now, for example, one of the sticking points that she has in her career was having the courage, supposedly, to remove the Confederate flag from her state capital, right? And that's something where it shows her being more on the moderate side insofar as she's willing to capitulate on the left. And it shows that she is a minority, and she probably does not feel the same way about the Southern heritage that many Southerners have compared to what she has, which is distinctly an Indian background, especially from her parents backwards, okay? Now, Trump was making it up. According to this political article, the writer, it said that Trump was making it up. There's been no discovery of material voting fraud. The president's legal team has lost 55 court cases and won just one. All 50 states have certified the results to the Electoral College, right? So as you can see here, this is in the presumption that there was no rigging. Of course, we know better. We know they had to fortify it. We know they had to rig it for Donald Trump to eventually have it stolen, okay? But let's keep it going. She countered that one case remained, a lawsuit brought by the Texas Attorney General, endorsed by over 100 Republican members of Congress, seeking to invalidate tens of millions of votes in battleground states, and it must be heard before Trump stands down. This is coming to an end, she said. Up until now, he has not been able to prove it in court, so if this continues to go down the path, Biden will be president, and he knows it. Okay, so Nikki Haley didn't really count Trump out until after the Texas lawsuit. I personally believe that after the Texas lawsuit, it went all downhill. That's completely true. But the question is, why, if she knows, wink, wink, that there was no rigging, why didn't she come out before then? Of course, she's not honest, she's unprincipled. She's just waiting for the right political moment to stab Donald Trump in the back, okay? Alright. You have the President of the United States telling everyone that he was cheated. Isn't that dangerous? And she smiles and says he believes it. So she's being a cunt right now, okay? Now, Haley wasn't prepared to have a conversation such as that. Like so many Republicans, she had expected Trump to either eke out a second term, putting a date certain to the end of his presidency in 2024, or lose so lopsidedly that his career would have been toast. Instead, he split the difference, losing by less than 1 percentage point in each of the 3 decisive states, and result that have him spiraling into delirium. The resulting paralysis could be seen across the GOP, but Haley was a special case. She knew she could not afford to antagonize the president, but her rationalizations for his behavior were so strained that they called into question her own judgment. This was a test for Haley, an early opportunity to define herself on a question of great national urgency, and she was failing. Next, there is nothing you are going to do that is going to make him feel like he legitimately lost the election, she said. He's got a big bully pulpit. He should be responsible with it. Okay, so as you can see here, she is trying to find a way of not helping Donald Trump, meanwhile not pissing him off at the same time. Because she wants the vote of the Trump supporters, and she knows that if she pisses off Donald Trump, that's going to definitely screw her over, right? At least this is the logic so far. Now, in terms of what is going on in the election, she thinks it wasn't stolen, but she thinks President Trump thought it was stolen, and she won't try to change his mind because she doesn't care what he thinks. She only cares about what he thinks insofar as it affects her. Okay? Okay. Let's keep going downwards here. Okay? So, of course, she had been right. The president had been surrounded by grifters and yes men. But what about Haley? She was supposed to have more respect than a Mark Meadows or a Rudy Giuliani or a Michael Flynn. But why doesn't she tell Trump the truth? She never was able to explain this. What she did offer was a reassurance. Okay? If the case falls through, referring to the Texas-Pennsylvania Supreme Court lawsuit, he's gonna go on his way. She had that part wrong. A few weeks later, Trump stood before a crowd of thousands of MAGA supporters and urged them to march on the Capitol and stop the steal. Okay? Walking out of the White House in fall of 2018, Haley thought the worst was behind her, right? No more briefings on presidential tweets, no more knife fighting with administration officials. She had spent 22 months in New York, equipped with a big boat and luxury home with $200,000 speaking gigs galore. Haley counted her winnings. Joining the Trump administration had been a massive gamble, and she had the jackpot, not only merging unscathed from the gauntlet that made many of her contemporaries, but also looking a lot smarter and sturdier for it. She had gained a rare foreign policy experience, know the role of an adult in the room, and raised her visibility in front of the donors and voters alike. Her political future wasn't intact. It was brighter than ever. So here's the thing. She purposely joined the Trump administration knowing that she might have actually been burnt up like happened to Sean Spicer, like happened to a lot of other people, and she risked it because she knew her career as governor was going to an end. She knew that Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott were going to stay in the Senate for the foreseeable future. She knew she had nothing better to do but become a congresswoman, and obviously that's a downgrade from governor usually, and that necessarily meant that Nikki Haley had to go somewhere else. So she hatched on to Trump, and she left before it got dirty and ugly because she's an opportunist, just like many politicians, but her especially, it's very severe. Okay. Of course, she did a Faustian bargain, according to the Politico article writer, right? Okay, we're going to keep going down here. So, since last fall, I've spent nearly 6 hours talking to Nikki Haley on the record. I've spoken to nearly 70 people who know her, friends, associates, donors, staffers, former colleagues. From those conversations, 2 things are clear. First, Nikki Haley is going to run for president in 2024. Second, she doesn't know which Nikki Haley will be on the ballot. Will it be Nikki Haley who has proven so adaptive and so canny that she might be able to accommodate herself to the dark realities of the Trump-dominated party? Will it be Haley who is combative and confrontational and had his history of giving no quarter to xenophobes? Or will it be Haley who refuses to choose between these characters, believing she can do everything to everyone? Interesting. Okay, she has a different sort of way. She can go full rhino and neocon, she can go and suck up to Trump, or she could pick a middle path. She seems pretty fucked either way, in my opinion, but we'll keep going on. Okay? I'm skimming through this. It's a lot of material. We're already 9 minutes in. I don't want to make it last forever. Alright. Everything Haley says is being scrutinized by those who have come to question her authenticity, including but not limited to the primetime lineup at Fox News, the mainstream media, and certain former president of the United States. This is impressed upon Haley in the recent months. Trump is one person she cannot afford to cast aside, which is why she wore a decisive smile as I interrogated her in mid-December, demonstrating unblinking loyalty to a man who is orchestrating a slow-motion mutiny against the U.S. government. So again, she is not being principled. She's just having the facade of supporting the president, even though she doesn't genuinely think so, and is willing to lie to everyone, including people that should not be honestly someone to lie about, like the media. And here you are. Still, even in those moments, I sensed her posture was unstable, right? Haley might not have a sculpted worldview. She might not have immovable convictions, but she does have an apparent humanity about her. She isn't indifferent to the suffering imparted by Trump and ignored by so many Republicans. The daughter of dark-skinned immigrants, Haley has talked of needing and validate their trust in this country to prove them that coming to America was the best decision they ever made. Having conquered the bigoted world of South Carolina politics, she once felt emboldened to speak her truth about Trump's racism, about the menace of white supremacy, about the demons that must be exorcised from the Republican Party. But since joining the administration, Haley had dialed back much of the moralizing, even when it's been difficult to do so. This is her constant tension of tug-of-war between conscience and calculation. So you see this. In her heart of hearts, she is soft on the race issue. Okay, she's not very conservative on that issue. She's anti-xenophobe and racist, whatever that means. She has this inferiority complex, or this immigrant complex, where she has to feel she has a need to validate herself in front of her parents. And she thinks of herself as the descendant of immigrants, and not an actual American, like many people in the South do. And as well as she feels as if there's a bigoted past to the Republican Party, and there's too many bigots in the Republican Party, and that's a huge issue. In my opinion, there's not that there's not enough racism, but that's definitely not the issue. The issue is people like Nikki Haley and Tim Scott that are weak on the race issue, that are willing to concede on a lot of these issues for the sake of looking good to the left and feeling good in their hearts, little hearts. Okay, so many of Haley's associates have long predicted the tension would inevitably lead with a sharp break from her former boss. The unanswered question always was, once the break happens, once the backlash happens to her, how would Haley respond? Would she dig in, decide to run a harder, more uncomfortable campaign that aligns with her beliefs about Trump and the party? Or would she pull back, spooked by ferocity of the far right, and choose to conform to the name of the betting odds in the presidency? Okay? January 6th offered the beginnings of an answer. 3.5 weeks after a discussion in the Kiawah Island Club, insurrectionists scaled the halls of the U.S. Capitol building. Okay, that's bullshit, not true. The president barely lifted okay. Flying down to Florida the next day for much of an anticipated keynote speech to the Republican National Committee's winter meeting, Haley had made a decision to make. She could continue to straddle the realms of the MAGA insurgency and the GOP establishment, couching a mild rebuke of Trump in a broader call for unity, doing just enough to satisfy the graybeards without alienating the red hats, or she could go with her gut. Okay, now this is a quote from Nikki Haley at the RNC committee, which happens after in January after an election. Okay, and it's people basically pitching what they want as the future of the party. Okay. President Trump has not always chosen the right words. He was wrong with the words in Charlottesville. I had told him so at the time. Haley told the RNC crowd, a ballroom stuffed with Trump supporters, he was badly wrong about his words yesterday. Then she added, it wasn't just his words. His actions since Election Day will be judged harshly by history. Haley on Republican supporters of Trump. I talked to this woman this morning, and she said, you know that the people that stormed the Capitol, there was a lot of Antifa, and what they did was they took their MAGA hat and turned it backwards. That was their signal that they were Antifa. This wasn't an educated, smart, long-time Republican woman. We've got a lot of work to do. They've been lied to by everybody, okay? Now, next. To be the skeptic, it would appear that Haley had done what was politically expedient, throwing Trump under the bus to curry favor with party elites. She did it in her own way in South Carolina, and it worked, because she was authentic. But when it came to contrived and consultant-driven, it was not going to work, said Kellyanne Conway, who served as Trump's White House counselor and remains a top advisor to former Vice President Mike Pence. I'm surprised that someone who took down the Old Boys Network to become governor, thinks that she needs the old boys network to become president. Make no mistake, Haley does want to be president. She told me no final decision had to be made, but she also secured commitments from top party strategists, including pollster John Lerner and consultant Nick Ayers. Okay. Now, that's interesting. Why? Well, John Lerner, I have no idea who the hell that is, but when you talk about Nick Ayers, I believe, was the chief of staff of Mike Pence. That's kind of showing something. These aren't necessarily Trump people. These are Mike Pence people. Rhinos. Okay? The old guard. Nick Ayers is a relatively young guy, but works for the old guard. So she's forming this, not from ex-Trump people, but from new neocons. No good. Alright, let's scroll down here. Quote, I don't talk a lot about the Charleston tragedy from a very personal level, Haley said quietly by way of explanation. But when Charlottesville happened, I was very triggered, she said, recalling a fatal rally in 2017. I know that bad things can happen, and I called Trump and said, I need you to realize your words matter, and what you say, and what you've been saying, and what someone else can hear have very different things. You have to understand that people can take that and hurt people with it. Trump said, Nikki, this isn't Charleston. Haley recalled, I'm not saying this is Charleston. I'm saying that I know that certain people hear your words and I will react and will react to that, and you have to be careful with that. She took a breath. Fast forward, I'm watching the television on the morning of the 6th. As he Don Jr. get up there, she said, reciting the president's son's calls to action against Republican leaders, closing her eyes as if reimagining the scene. And then I hear the president get up there and go off on Pence. I literally was so triggered, I had to turn it off. I mean, John Lerner texted me something, and I couldn't watch it. Because I felt the same thing. Somebody's going to hear that, and something bad will happen. I asked Haley whether she had spoken to Trump since January 6th, and she shook her head. When I tell you I'm angry, it's an understatement, Haley hissed, leaning forward as she spoke. Mike has done nothing but be loyal to that man. He's done nothing but be a good friend of that man, and I'm so disappointed in the fact that despite the loyalty and the friendship he had with Mike Pence, that he would do that to him. Like, I'm disgusted by it. As you can see from the response here, this is not genuine. She was waiting for a specific excuse for Donald Trump to be in a weak spot, to go against him publicly. She waited to go against Trump until after January 6th, after the riot at the Capitol, after the intrusion there, because she knew that was bad optics, and she took that opportunity to hit him. And she hit him on the Charlottesville hoax, where he said nothing wrong, and she still took the media narrative knowing better, and calling him out on it after it happened, whereas in 2017 when it happened, she didn't say shit. But now in 2021, she's going to go and be all pious about it, because she is a facetious politician, right? And all this concern fagging, or whatever you want to call it, where she's like, oh, Mike Pence, he's such a good guy, he was such a good friend. I don't really care. The fact is that he had power in helping Trump send the slate of electors back to the legislatures and have them do an audit. He didn't do it because he's a pussy, or because he didn't want to help Trump. Either he didn't want to do it, or he thought he couldn't do it. Either way, he was at fault. And you know what? He did deserve to be thrown under the bus by Trump, because he betrayed him, okay? He deserved it. And by Nikki Haley defending Mike, Mike wasn't that good. In the retrospect, at the moment, an article of impeachment had been drafting in, and there's been pressure to invoke the 25th Amendment. Haley rolled her eyes. I think it's a waste of time. I think impeachment is a waste of time. So I asked, how should the president be held accountable? I think he's going to find himself further and further isolated, Haley said. I think his business is suffering at this point. I think he's lost any sort of political viability he was going to have. I think he's lost his social media, which meant the world to him. I mean, I think he's lost things that really could have kept him moving. I reminded her that Trump had been left for dead before, that the base would always rally behind him. I always reminded her that the argument for impeachment and conviction is that he would have been barred from holding federal office again. She said, he's not going to run for federal office again, Haley said. But what if he does? Or at least, what if he spends the next 4 years threatening to? Can the Republican Party heal with Trump in the picture? I don't think he's going to be in the picture, she said matter-of-factly. I don't think he can. He's fallen so far. So this evil cunt, look at what she just said. Nikki Haley basically said, this interviewer is like, well, Nikki, well, no, Trump, he's been counting down before, but the base is still there. He still has the main following. And she says, oh, no, don't worry. No, his cloud's too long. No, don't worry. He won't run in 4 years. Why does she say that? Because she wants to run in 4 years. She knows that if Trump runs, he'll kill her politically. She'll be dead in the water if Trump runs. Which is why she's betting on the riots to take down Trump. Which is why she's kicking Trump down while he's at his weakest. Come on. Okay. Listen, when I walked into the RNC room, I was not expecting a whole lot of love from that speech, she said. I know how much people love Donald Trump, and I know it, I feel it. Whether it's an RNC room or social media or talking to donors, I can tell you that the love they have for him is still very strong, and that's not going to fall to the wayside. So even she knows that they love him. Nobody loves her, right? And she's still delusional enough to think that she can be president. She added, nor do I think the Republican Party is going to go back to the way it was before Donald Trump. I just don't think it should. I thought that what we need to do is take the good that he built, leave the bad that he did, and get back to a place where we can get good, valuable, and an effective party. But at the same time, it's bigger than the party. I hope that our country can come back together and figure out how we can pull this back. But how can America come together without anyone taking responsibility for the acts that took place between November 4th and January 6th? I asked Haley, does she regret not talking Trump down when she had the chance? Did she regret not speaking up publicly? Did she regret laughing off my questions about how dangerous the campaign of mass deception might prove to be? At the time, I didn't think it was dangerous, she said. I didn't think that there would be anything to fear about him. There was nothing to fear about him when I worked for him. I mean, he may have been brash, he may have been blunt, but he was someone who cared about the country, and I still stand by that. I don't think we should ever apologize for the policies that we fought for and the things that we did during his 4 years since the election. She stopped herself. I mean, I'm deeply disturbed at what's happened to him. Healy repeated these sentiments over the course of a 2-hour conversation. Never did I think that he would spiral like this. I don't even feel like I know who he is anymore. The person I worked for is not the person that I've watched since the election. Was Haley really surprised that Trump, who had spent previously 4 years amending claims of mass voter fraud, would try to destabilize the democratic process? If the answer is yes, as she exists, it raises a fundamental question about her discernment. If she has so badly misread Trump, a man whose habits and methods are as ample as an opportunity to study up close, then how could she be trusted to be handle the likes of Vladimir Putin? Which is a sort of right thing. The journalist knows for a fact that if she is competent at all, she would have known that Trump had it in him to do the stuff that happened on January 6th. Of course, she either knew it and she's a liar, or she's a retard, okay? But she's not a genuine, intelligent person, because if she were, look at what's happening. It's a contradiction. Haley bristled at the question. What I'll tell you is that you can look at my leadership over the first second I got into the State House to the second that I was governor to everything I did at the UN. My leadership stands on its own grounds. I'm not going to apologize. It's not poor leadership. That's sitting there looking at someone, knowing the relationship that you had, knowing the good that had, and watching someone fall apart in awe, going, how did this happen? Listening to Haley, it occurred to me that one day soon, people could be watching her fall apart and they'd be asking the same question. How did this happen? If that day comes, the answer will rest on a simple truth. She is still trying to have it both ways. To argue that Trump only spent 2 months pummeling our institutional norms instead of 4 years is to refuse admitting any culpability for the party and the country going off the rails. But to state that the millions of people that voted for him into a dead end of social and political violence is to acknowledge that something is very, very wrong, and before that, and even wrong before 2016. At the heart of the contradiction is a showdown between who she wants to be and who she thinks she needs to be. Nikki Haley's fundamental conflict is not with Donald Trump, it's with Nikki Haley. Bing, bing, bong. Exactly. Now, she's the outsider, right? Now, we're going to go into her Indian ancestry, okay? Ajit Singh Randhawa and Raj Kaur Randhawa were an ideal match, both hailed from the Punjab region of India. Both were Sikh, which is like the turban Muslim-looking Arabs or Indians. Ajit had learned a master's degree in biology, whereas his wife was a rare Indian woman who completed law school They moved to Vancouver in the 1960s. She can pursue a PhD. Upon graduation, Ajit found teaching positions at Voorhees College, a small black school in Denmark, South Carolina. Raj was not sold on moving to America. Nevertheless, they went to Columbia, the state's diminutive capital, in 1969 and settled into Brandenburg, the population being the key rented. Hold on. Fuck, my thing stuck. Okay. 11. Alright. Okay, so again, when they came to South Carolina, they were wearing their turbans, so already they're not assimilated. And when she was born in 1972, Nikki was on her birth certificate, even though her real name was anything but that, really. It was, I think, Namrata, right? No, that's her as an infant. There was all these whispers, all these rumors because of the turban and the one knot. It took some people a while to get over it, but they never really took off the Indian stuff, okay? Now, she's over here complaining about, oh, I had to eat American food and the curry food, whatever. She was still animated by the stories of her childhood, how teachers made her play Pocahontas for Thanksgiving pageants, how her black and white classmates asked her to choose between which racial team she'd play kickball for. So whatever. No racism, just like, oh, you know, in the schoolyard they made me play the Indian, whatever. So over here, she says that her father was stopping at a fruit stand, and as he bagged the grocery, the owner's eyeing his turban. Haley saw one of them pick up a phone. Within minutes, two police cars zooming up. My dad didn't say a word going home. He was hoping I didn't notice, but I heard for him whether it was that. So apparently they were racially profiled, which makes sense because what are Indians doing in Columbia, South Carolina? I mean, whatever. I don't feel bad. Now, okay, they opened a small clothing store called Exotica. Over the time, her handmade formal gowns became so popular with the local ladies, the word spread that from Brandenburg to surrounding towns that Raj bought a storefront in Main Highway 301. So, okay, I'm skipping over the shit. So basically what they would do is sell dresses. Okay. Nikki Haley, right, whatever. So that's her family, the Muslim turban, again. Her parents were very strict, not allowed to do a lot of things socially, right? That's in their culture. She always tried to be self-deprecating, okay. She went to Clemson University, alright. Hold on, my thing got stuck again. Fuck. Gosh darn it. Alright. We're gonna catch up with the reading. Wait, hold on. Alright. Finally escaping home, she went to college. Self-determination. She had a waitressing job. She lived in an apartment. She's a very stubborn woman. So again, she was raised as a conservative Indian for like 20 years. Went to college. Alright, let's go back down. Let me put it this way. A prominent Republican businessman in South Carolina said, if you asked me back then, of the 100 people in her class who might run for office today, I would have put her in the bottom 10. So apparently when she was in college, she didn't look like she was going to run for office. Interesting. After college, she got married, had 2 kids, worked in accounting for a Charlotte recycling firm, and finally returned home to handle the finances of the family store, Exotica, which is swelled to $1 million business with a new location in Lexington. Okay, so apparently the parents had a small business. Her legs look really long here. She was with a Tea Party group in 2009. So again, she's supposed to be based. Not really. First, it was the local Chamber of Commerce. Later, it was within a small business owner group. Haley discovered something interesting, that the people liked her. They listened to her, whatever the party affiliation was. But to be a striver in Lexington County, becoming a Democrat was never an option. Her associates urged her to run for school board in 2004, but she had other plans. She came before to see if she was going to run for state representative Okay, the story underscores how Haley had consistently downplayed the narrative of her searing ambition. Haley has often described how it was for Allison who suggested running for the House seat. Haley claims she did not know who currently held it or whether she lived in that district, but according to Allison, who likes Haley and hopes she would become president, that is not true. Obviously, she had done her research. She knew what district she lived in. She knew what she'd been running against. Allison told me, I found her to be very strong-willed because she knew that she had served many years in the South Carolina House. I warned her that it would not be an easy road to travel. So as you can see here, she pretended not to know about what she was going to do, and then she did it anyway. Because again, she pretends like, oh, no, I'm not running for president, blah, 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 blah. But she ends up running for president or for state house because she's a liar, okay? So that's a sociopathic type of trend that I'm seeing here. She felt like she owed her parents to be in politics again, so that's her immigrant sort of brain making her do that, which is a liability, in my opinion, to an extent, okay? She spoke in broad conservative strokes about getting government out of the way, right? Not a firebrand. She refused to sign the Taxpayers Protection Pledge, a document which made taxpayers never raise taxes for any reason. I see that as giving a blanket answer. No one wants to see taxes raised, but I think that it would be a closed-minded thing to sign the pledge. So that's very telling. She would not sign the pledge that would stop her from raising taxes. That's very interesting. It's not a question of, okay, well, what about the deficit? Well, if there's a deficit, cut the spending, not raise taxes. That's simple, right? Haley shocked local politicos by capturing 40% of the vote in a primary. During the 2-week runoff election, the opposition Republican Kuhn, his campaign featured ads referring to her as Nimrata and distributed mailers showing her alongside her father in a turban. Smear campaigns spread rapidly online. Some messages mocked her Middle Eastern or Eastern world roots. Others explicitly accused her of being a Muslim radical. It wasn't 3 years removed from the attacks on September 11th. Haley's legislative district was deeply conservative and was more than 90% white. So again, people are using the Muslim stuff against her, right? So over here, she's looking very thin. Anyway, an unlikely hero in Haley's story was Joe Wilson, a congressman who would later had the infamy for shouting "You lie" at President Barack Obama's during his address to the joint session of Congress. Wilson, who chaired the India caucus on Capitol Hill, had kept a close eye on Nikki Haley. But when the racist ads hit, Wilson drove to Exotica and introduced himself to the Haley family, or the Randhawa family. He took a picture with the candidate and her parents, decked it out to the first Punjabi garb, and authorized her to disseminate it from the campaign. His people advising Haley was nervous about the photo, and it was drawing undue attention to the family, right? Nikki had already met every single voter who got those mailers. They all knew. They had all talked to her, says Kate and Dawson, right? So she won the runoff by 10 points. So the Indian thing didn't even stop her. So again, this racism stuff is not even a big deal. Right. Her whole career has been stair climbing, and becoming a Methodist was just one of those stairs. Everybody knew she wasn't a real Christian. She just converted for political purposes. So again, how sociopathic do you have to be to convert religion for political gain? That's an extremely intimate thing, to change religion, and she did it anyway. Okay? Here's her thing. I've always been the only one of something, the only one. There's never been a line to the woman's bathroom in any of the jobs that I did. I don't know what the fuck that's supposed to mean. It's worth noting that it's not a minority view in South Carolina. Unfounded rumors of a religion aside, Haley is viewed by many political insiders as doing whatever necessary to advance. If so, her advance was somewhat halting, owing to her reliance on instinct over ideology. Haley faced considerable backlash for sponsoring a 2007 bill mandating HPV vaccines for minors without a provision for parental opt-out. The sort of big government program no conservative politician would support unless her political antennae was broken. And in a sense, Haley was not shaped by particular cause or dogma, but by the disrespect she encountered by the GOP caucus. Rejected by her colleagues, Haley stopped listening to the conventional wisdom and started rebelling against the leadership. I don't need to be that one that everybody likes. She remembers thinking, I don't need to be the person that gets along with everybody. So she wanted to be an outsider, okay? Now, this is the best window into Haley's formative political period. She had been loathed by many Republicans for not being a team player, going rogue on certain votes and procedures that made them look slimy or stupid to her benefit. But it was their exclusion of her in the first place that set Haley down the path of torturing the establishment, of tapping into the sentiments of the Tea Party, and ultimately allying herself with Governor Mark Sanford. Mark Sanford, of course, known for having a sexual scandal in his governorship, I believe, who then ran in the primary against Donald Trump in 2020 about decency, which is ironic. South Carolina's governorship is among the nation's weakest, a legacy that dates to the antebellum concerns that a black man might one day be elected to the state's highest office and would need constraining of white legislators. They didn't foresee a brown woman bearing the Confederate flag. Many governors have treated the position as almost ceremonial in nature. Sanford did not. A quirky intellectual with a libertarian streak, Sanford spent his 2 terms at war with the State House, demanding less spending, and members of his own party regularly defied him. Haley was one of those few lawmakers to stand with Sanford, even when it came down to one of his more indefensible positions, which was to turn down money from Obama's stimulus package in 2009. I do think she agreed with some of what Sanford believed in, but she was also at war with the party like he was, said Luke Bayers, the former executive director of the state GOP. That was what came to typify her political philosophy, okay? So she just wanted to fight with the GOP. Haley's biggest victory came after a bloody internal campaign to force lawmakers to cast every vote on the record. This struck many of her colleagues as symbolic showboating. It certainly was that, but it was also a masterstroke of populism. Haley traversed the state, filling constituents with the stories of the elected officials avoiding accountability, and it cost Haley a coveted committee seat, but it won her the affection of Sanford. So already she's using the governor to triangulate against the House, which she had already pissed off because she was not being conservative enough to really be popular in the caucus. Now, she did do something good, which is make all the votes be on record. And that is populist, that is based, but she did it for the wrong reasons, okay? So she does not get credit. Alright. So, uninspired by the field of Republicans running to replace him, Sanford spent the spring of 2009 talking to his team, led by pollster and chief advisor John Lerner, about how a governor's legacy hinges on the election of a like-minded successor. Then one day, Sanford surprised everyone who had just met with Haley, who was then angling for state treasurer, and urged her to run for governor instead. He asked Lerner to commission her a poll. They scheduled the meeting 1 week later, with Haley and her husband at the governor's mansion. When they gathered, it showed bad news. Haley was identified by just 6% of likely voters, and her ballot share was only 3%. There was a silver lining, though. None of the other GOP contenders were particularly well-liked, despite being well-known. Still, there was no apparent path for Haley. Her only hope was the support of the polarizing and mercurial governor. Sanford put in writing the steps that he would take to elect Haley at appearances, fundraisers, public events. Her friends urged her to play the long game and run for treasurer, but Haley could not help herself. Okay, interesting to know. So she ran for governor prematurely. She debated Vincent Shaheen, who the fuck is that, in 2010. Now, in June 2009, the month after Nikki Haley stunned Republicans in declaring for her candidacy for governor, Mark Sanford disappeared on his infamous hike down Appalachian Trail when the news broke that Sanford had in fact gone to Argentina to visit his mistress. It seemed like to sound a death knell for Haley's infant campaign. All of the people who had helped her up to that point were working for rival campaigns. Just 3 of her House colleagues endorsed her. She had not been taken seriously. There was like 10 of us who thought that she could win, recalled Matt Moore, a longtime friend of Haley's who later said she installed as a state party chairman. When Sanford went down, her fundraising completely dried up, and we all thought it was over. I mean, people were calling all over to call her to Trump out. And then we remember her being near tears. She wondered aloud if it was even worth staying in. So, of course, the bitch is crying about it. And so Sanford was caught with the mistress in Argentina, And that's obviously not a good thing, but Argentinian women are attractive. I don't blame them. Right? Now, a turning point for Haley came in August when she attended a candidate training seminar on the West Coast and met Florida Governor Jeb Bush. Aware of her predicament, the presidential scion advised Haley to embrace being an underdog if she ran on a grassroots campaign. He told her, meeting with as many voters and groups as possible, she could sneak up on the field. Inspired the long shot campaign, starting by every corner on the state, ferried from a stop to stop by Tim Pearson, one of Sanford's ex-staffers in a Toyota 4Runner, talking to rooms of 10 to 12 people at a time. The campaign had no real fundraising apparatus, so Haley brought a wicker basket, all but begging for donations. So, she actually had to try here and not take big money. Her Republican rivals all thought it was pathetic, but it seemed to be working. Lerner polled the race at Christmas time. He was pleasantly surprised to see her name identification had jumped to 18% from 6% back in May. She had still trailed far behind three different candidates, including Congressman Gresham Barrett, Attorney General Henry McMaster, and Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer. But there was still hope for the Haley campaign. Barrett, considered the favorite in the race, knew Haley was attacking his right flank, but his team didn't take her seriously. Here's what the focus group tell us. She's smart, she's talented, she gets the result, and she's conservative. Whit Ayers, the pollster for Barrett's campaign, briefed the high command at the beginning of 2010, but if she starts raising money, she's screwed. We are screwed. Okay? Interesting. But as you can see here, she's getting endorsed by Sarah Palin in 2010, which increases legitimacy for her campaign. Now, Haley needed to get in front of more people. And fortunately, in January, she stole the show during an MSNBC-hosted primary debate, savaging Barrett over his vote for the bank bailouts in 2008. The other thing she needed was a big-name endorsement. Haley's campaign worked two targets in particular, Mitt Romney and Sarah Palin. The former pair of two governors spoke to disparate constituencies, but both were known to back an underdog. Haley was busy reeling in a big fish at home. Sanford would refuse to resign after the extramarital scandal, making him persona non grata in the race. Privately, however, Haley knew he was sitting on a fortune in campaign cash. Every week, Haley would pay a visit to Sanford's office, sitting on his couch and describing the financial woes killing her campaign. Every week, Sanford would listen politely, then explain that a massive cash infusion was not part of his written agreement with her. But eventually, Sanford wore down. It wasn't just Haley's persistence. Several of her other mutual associates, including Lerner and Tom Davis, the governor's chief of staff, argued that she was within striking distance, and Sanford could put her over the top, making up for the harm that she had done to her candidacy. So far, Nikki Haley is ostensibly, she's more or less over here trying to shake down the governor's money so that she can get put over the top in the primary race for governor. Even after she knew that the governor lied about an affair, she's still willing to get money from him because she is corrupt. Haley on dealing with racism in South Carolina politics. In the governor's race, I remember my dad would go to stand in the back of the room because he did not want anyone to see him because he was scared it was going to hurt me. And that was the reason why I started every speech saying I'm a proud daughter of Indian immigrants. See, this is cringe. I'm the proud daughter of Polish immigrants, of Indian immigrants. I don't care. I agreed to spend about $400,000 on her behalf, and she only had to raise $400,000 in her whole campaign, Sanford recalls. I didn't feel good about giving her that much, but my world was shattered at that point. They talked me into it, Sanford adds. And then she cut me off. This was systematic, Haley. Nikki, she cuts people off who have contributed to her success. It's almost as if there's some weird psychological thing where she needs to pretend it's self-made. Haley's campaign took off. Romney delivered his endorsement right around the time that Sanford was writing his check. Eric Erickson, the popular conservative blogger, hosted a money bomb fundraiser and made Haley a celebrity overnight. On tax day, she headlined a Tea Party rally at the state capitol. Sanford's affiliated group shot footage and launched their massive ad campaign. Haley then blitzed local television stations with her own buy, foregoing introductory niceties and savaging her three opponents as weak-kneed pawns of the establishment. Palin provided the finishing touch. For months, Nick Ayers, the executive director of the Republican Governors Association, had lobbied the former vice presidential nominee for an endorsement. She finally swooped in the state less than a month before the June 8th primary, throwing her weight behind Haley at a rally that saturated statewide media coverage. The race was all but over. It was like watching a NASCAR driver coming in screaming from way behind everybody else, says Dawson. The former state secretary's chairman has said that he has seen nothing like it. But for Haley, no road worth traveling has not been without potholes. In late May, just before the primary, a political blogger who had done some work for Haley in the State House made an explosive accusation. He claimed that to have carried on a romantic relationship with her at the time. The following week, a prominent Columbia lobbyist, a paid fundraiser for the Bauer campaign, alleged that he and Haley had a one-night stand. And then days before the primary, Knotts, the senator who had tortured Haley in the legislature, gained national attention for calling her a raghead on internet broadcast. Okay, that's based. No. So apparently she was accused for a political blogger who had worked for Haley that they'd had an affair, right? And somebody who worked for the other campaign said that they had a one-night stand. Interesting. When they couldn't defeat me on the merits, that's what they did. Haley told me, angrily denying the affair allegations, and they literally paid money to have that happen, and that's something that I'll never get over. To be clear, there's never been any evidence to substantiate the extramarital rumors, although some people in Colombia still peddle them unsolicited. Nor it was even proven that Haley's opponents were funding the allegations, though Haley would go to her grave believing that the senior officials on both the Bauer and Barrett campaigns played a role. So she lied about them getting paid to say what they said about the affair. All the while, Haley, what are the odds that she committed an affair? I'd say it's about 50-50. She's obviously not a moral person, and I would not put it past her. So we'll see what happens. Okay. What is indisputable is that the entire scandal helped Haley. Voters proved to be mostly sympathetic to the lone female candidate who looked to be the victim of clumsily coordinated attacks by her male rivals. Meanwhile, a storehouse of opposition research on Haley that had been collected, legitimate demerits that might have actually hurt her campaign, was rendered useless by the feeding frenzy surrounding the affair allegations. We had all this bad shit on her. All these fines from the IRS, all these red flags from her accounting work, all these shady payouts she was taking as a consultant while working at the legislature, and we were going to beat her when it was during the runoff, said Terry Sullivan, a longtime GOP consultant at the South Carolina native who helped lead Barrett's campaign. But then it all went to waste. It was almost impossible to get the information out because the media was so obsessed with the sex scandal, and the race was basically over. For much of the election night, she teetered just past 49%, at several points appearing to be several points to have the votes necessary to hit 50% and avoid the runoff altogether. When she felt just short, Haley disappeared in the women's room at the restaurant hosting her party and refused to come out. Only after her mother went in and delivered some tough love that her daughter did a quick speech. 2 minutes later, Haley thumped Barrett by 30 points, and there would be a real celebration there. But it came with a hiccup. Haley, who would soon make history as the country's first female Indian American governor, booked the State Museum in Columbia for her party. But the only place the advance team could erect a stage was directly beneath a sign that read Confederate Relic Room. Haley would not stand for it. Her team assembled a banner of red and white balloons and covered up the sign. Which is stupid. She's such a pussy that she could not stand that one of the signs said Confederate Relic Room. Meanwhile, these blacks have had to deal with it this entire time, but now this Indian's like, oh, I'm triggered, it's racist, it's unreasonable. So this Indian knows better than the blacks, okay? And if the blacks aren't really offended, then why is she, right? This is just her immigrant background. She's overcompensating. She doesn't need to be this way, but she is, okay? Haley's honeymoon period as governor was non-existent. This was because how she limped into office. Not only did the Democrat out-hustle Haley on the trail, he ran with all the opposition research her GOP rivals had collected. As the salacious headlines faded, Haley, the accountant and good government advocate, was confronted with a string of bruising stories about a messy trail of tax liens and IRS penalties, about a sweetheart six-figure job from a foundation she had backed in the legislature, about a falsified application she submitted to land that job. Shaheen hammered the issue of Haley's trustworthiness, tying her to Sanford with ads that said, "Can we afford another governor who says one thing and does another?" In the end, Haley beat Shaheen by only 4 points, and an embarrassing narrow margin given the Republican wave nationwide. Which is exactly true. In a normal election, she probably would have won by like 8 or 10 points. With a red wave, she could have won by like 12, 13, 14, 15 points. But she, in fact, only won by 4, which is awfully pathetic. It'd be like the equivalent of like Ted Cruz winning by 2 in Texas. It's not good. Not good news. Now, in terms of Nikki Haley definitely did some things with the IRS and stuff like this. So she is confirmed corrupt on paper. Not only that, but she's corrupt metaphysically and philosophically as well. This has all been proven. Does she have to be a whore that sleeps with other people other than their husband? No, but she can still be a bitch in other ways, okay? And this is only part of the way through. Okay? This pissed off Haley and prompted her to take actions that former skeptics' worst suspicions. The new governor purged from the state boards numerous members with verifying degrees of attachment to the establishment, catchable for everyone who had supported the rivals in the GOP primary, replacing them with friends and campaign donors. This including the baffling ouster of State Party Chairwoman Karen Floyd, who helped Haley survive the general election from the powerful Port Authority Board. She doubled down on Sanford's approach to the legislature, publishing report cards for the public to see how members voted with respect to her priorities. She tried to bully the State House with a special session, only to be sued in the state Supreme Court and lose. Meanwhile, Republicans launched an ethics probe alleging she had broken lobbying laws while serving in the House. The charges were later dropped. Haley warred with the local media, embracing Palin's martyrdom routine. Consumed with retribution, she had set about destroying the lobbying practice of the man she had alleged the one-night stand. She spearheaded the effort to defeat Nance in the 2012 campaign. Around the time he lost, a white supremacist killed 6 people at a Sikh temple in Wisconsin, an event that reinforced to Haley that there needed to be a purge of supposed hate mongers in the party. In one episode that became lore in Columbia, Haley invited the newly elected chair of the South Carolina GOP, Chad Connolly, to the governor's mansion for breakfast. She then spent 2 hours excoriating him for his friendships with strategists from the Bear and Bauer campaigns, warning Connolly that she would be watching his every move, which just comes off completely wrong. So when somebody wins an election completely fair in the GOP and they worked for the people in the primary, and now she's over here saying, I'm watching your damn move, boy. You better not do something I don't like. I mean, come on. When did Trump berate people that worked for Rubio that won their own election irrespective of him for 2 hours like that? I mean, come on. She's crazy. Listen, man, she'll cut you into pieces, says Dawson, the former party commissioner and unofficial dean of the state GOP. Nikki Haley has a memory. She has a memory. She will remember who was with her and who was against her, and she will not give it a second chance to anyone who thinks she is wrong. Haley was once nicknamed Mark Sanford in a dress, but around this time, a modified phrase became popular in Columbia: Bill Clinton in a skirt, which was really bad. This was not meant solely an insult. In addition to her vengeful streak and her slippery side, everyone could see her immense political gifts. In my lifetime in politics, the only person I've seen to compare her with is Bill Clinton, said Senator Tom Davis, who was Sanford's chief of staff as governor. She has the same charisma, the same pulse on people, the same force of personality. Mick Mulvaney, the future White House chief of staff, who served with Haley in the State House and had a share of run-ins with her over the years, told me Haley perfected the Clinton model of icing perceived enemies. She may have the most ambitious person I've ever met, and that's okay, Mulvaney said. I'm just surprised she felt it necessary to burn bridges with so many people for no apparent reason. Okay, now she is ambitious. That's 100% proven. She wants power. That's 100% proven. The immigrant status feeds into that notion, which is 100% proven. And she is so reckless. She is so ambitious. For whatever fucking reason, she goes after people with no valid excuse just to screw them over. Because she has an ego as well. Haley acknowledged her putrid opening act at the governor's office when she started writing her memoir in 2012 that allowed her to vent and move forward. Her friends snicker at the rationalization Haley's list of enemies had not faded one bit. They say, but there is no question she corrected course. With her approval rating among Republicans barely being 60%, the governor began to build relationships with local media. She dialed back the inflammatory Facebook posts and started wooing lawmakers. She sought out advice from the older advisor Jeb Bush on tackling education reform. She appointed Congressman Tim Scott to the U.S. Senate, making him the first black senator from the South since Reconstruction. Haley had felt that since Scott's popularity inside the GOP felt threatened by his popularity inside the GOP, didn't contact him for 9 days after the seat became vacant. She then invited him to dinner and asked him if they would introduce his appointment the next morning. It was 0 to 60 on the speed of a Tesla, Scott recalled. Perhaps most important, she abandoned her many smaller flights into a focus of a great tax to her, luring industry to South Carolina. It was this role as chief salesperson of the state that Haley truly excelled. Her cutthroat pursuit of international business, hopping on the flights to Europe with hours' notice to make a personal pitch to some board or CEO, endeared her time as adversaries in Colombia. When Haley left the governorship, 400,000 more people were employed in South Carolina than when she took office. The period of economic boom concealed many of the warts of her tenure and highlighted yet another successful rebranding of Haley. The truth is, Sanford was very ideological, always worrying about the budget and taking very unpopular stands, said Byers, the longtime GOP friend and consultant of Nikki Haley. Nikki tried that. It didn't work. She wanted to be the jobs governor. Some took a more cynical view. Nikki's willing to do whatever she needs to do and whatever she needs to be. A long-time arch-conservative in the State House, Lee Bright, had earned an A+ on Haley's inaugural report cards and received her endorsement when he ran for Senate in 2012. But the two had an ugly falling out during the governorship. He added, "The fact is, she does not have a core. Adapting to the electorate is what keeps you around in politics, and she'd done it more effectively than anyone I had ever seen. She had been from the enemy of the establishment to being the face of the establishment." Bright cited sharp disagreements with Haley on spending subsidies and accepting federal funds, issues which she had contradicted in her past positions. The governor wound up signing the Taxpayer Protection Pledge, a document that she criticized early in her career, but her greatest apostasy in her eyes was the defining act of Haley's career. Now this is the time for choosing. In 2015, a white supremacist, so that's Dylan Roof, killed several blacks in a church, right? Okay. So Haley was not at first keen on tackling a controversy that cost her one of her predecessors his job, but when photos surfaced of an assassin posing with the Confederate flag and boasting his efforts to start a race war, Haley decided, without input from a single advisor, colleague, or friend, that the flag needed to go. The governor couldn't afford to inflame tensions, nor did she want to appear opportunistic, for what she'd been doing was obviously the right thing. If I had come out and said, "The flag is hatred, it's racist, shame on you for wanting to keep it up," yeah, it would have made me look like a superstar, but it wouldn't have done a service for the people that it was trying to serve, Haley told me. I had to be respectful in the way I tried to communicate with them. I had not to be a threat. I had to do it in a way that they were making the decision, not me. So Haley's quote on the Confederate flag: "I've lived my life trying not to judge people because I know what it's like to be judged. So if you want me to go say the certain people are bad, I'm not going to do that, because there's some of my friends who still respect the Confederate flag, and there's some of my friends who think it's a horrible thing. I'm not going to pick any of those friends over the others." So again, she's lying, she's being facetious. She's not being outwardly spoken about her of her own opinion, because she knows it's not popular. That's why she's not being open. But it was Haley's decision, and it wasn't a comfortable one. For all the flowery talk about how far South Carolina has come with an Indian American governor and a black senator, the truth is that both Haley and Tim Scott knew they were expected to toe a line on behalf of their very white conservative base. But she also knew that history was calling upon her. For whatever her modulations on policy issues, this was a tragedy striking at the heart of who Haley had always been. Okay. Acting on raw instincts who had been animating her, Haley called in every favor she had, enlisting allies from the Republican National Committee Chairman Reince Priebus to Reverend Jesse Jackson. The governor orchestrated a swarming pressure campaign to force the legislature to vote to permanently remove the Confederate flag from the state capitol grounds. I was in the room when she hauled legislators in to make her final appeal on the flag. It was one of the most extraordinary moments I'd ever seen in my life, said Matt Moore, who was the state GOP chairman. People somehow still think now that it was fait accompli to take the flag down. But all the way up until that moment, I thought the vote was going to fail. The House leadership told Nikki that their members didn't want to go through with it, and Nikki had put all the political capital on the line. She leaned on them hard. She said, "If you vote for this and get attacked for it, I will come to your district and campaign for you personally." According to several lawmakers who pledged their support to Haley, who had persuaded them. Finally, listening to the story of the police. Okay, whatever. I think Nikki Haley. Okay, whatever. So basically, she was able to get the Confederate flag down. And what credit does she get from the left for doing it? Absolutely nothing. Good girl. She will never get credit that she deserves for leading the charge, Davis said, the state senator. In retrospect, some people think it would be easy, but it was the hardest fight I'd ever seen. The flag would have never come down without Nikki Haley, so that's very telling. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the Confederacy, but I don't want to take the flags down, and her reasoning for it is fucking terrible as well. So, her taking down the flag is not a selling point for me, and it isn't for a lot of conservative people, and further right-wing people than even, Nikki Haley, of course. Haley had dabbled in these debates before. When running for governor, she started every speech by declaring, "I'm a proud daughter of Indian immigrants who reminded us every day how blessed we are to live in this country," a preemptive way to neutralize whispers about her faith to her dad's turban. In early 2013, after appointing Tim Scott to the U.S. Senate, Haley scoffed at the National Party's failure to reach minority voters. The Republican Party has always been very good at saying we included everyone, but they've never taken time to show it. Haley told me at the time, when have they ever gone to a minority community and said, "What do you care about? We're a better country because you're in it"? Well, okay, if she's so right about the black people, is mainly what I'm talking about, how well did she do with blacks in her re-election campaign? We're going to see very soon. Yet Haley had been smart enough to be insufficiently self-aware to not push much harder. She intuitively understood that Republicans weren't ready to have those hard conversations. Haley believed that had changed after Charleston because Charleston had changed her. Friends told me how she had lost a dangerous amount of weight in the weeks following the shooting as she blitzed the legislature over the flag. And visited the affected families and quietly attended all 9 funerals. Haley's career, to the point, had been marked by moments of inauthenticity, but this was not one of them. Everyone around her could see that she had been permanently altered in her political DNA. I'd always been amazed with her ability to handle whatever came her way. Okay, let's keep going. It's through this prism that the following year of Haley's life should be understood. Watching the ascent of Donald Trump, whose candidacy was fueled by ostracizing Mexicans, Muslims, blah, 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 blah. Fake news. Haley had been pleased with the diverse, talented slate of Republican candidates led by her older friend Jeb Bush, and was confident that one of them would slay the dragon of Trump. And by the time of her nationally televised speech in January 2016, however, Haley had lost any such confidence. Trump was bullying his way to the GOP nomination, watching him finish a close second in Iowa, then annihilate the field in New Hampshire. Haley knew that the third primary contest in her South Carolina represented a last stand. Her endorsement was both highly coveted and highly unlikely. Republicans universally expected that Haley would remain neutral out of respect of her old friend because Bush's campaign was on life support. There was no reason for Haley to throw away her political capital endorsing him. Bush understood that, but he also knew Haley shared disgust against Trump over a long dinner at the governor's mansion days after the New Hampshire primary. The two aired their grievances about the reality show candidate. Bush was the most unglued Haley had ever seen him, flailing his arms, red in the face, visibly degraded. Bush would have been all the more angrier had he known Haley had other dinner guests planned. So as you can see here, Jeb, the low-energy Jeb, sleepy Jeb, no, low-energy Jeb, remember, flailing his arms. I would pay to see that. So Trump broke him. That's fucking hilarious. Haley on adversary. I don't want to read that. Secretly, in the days after the New Hampshire primary, Haley's team reached out on both the Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio camps. Each candidate was invited to have dinner with the governor and bring their spouse and one staffer. Haley did not really know Cruz, but he was everything she had expected. Awkward and sincere over a painfully long dinner, the Texas senator recited line after line from his stump speech. When she asked Cruz near the end of the dinner what would he want his legacy to be as president, he responded, "I want to be remembered as the president who repealed every word of Obamacare." When the senator left, Haley and her staff burst into laughter. Yeah, phony, lying Ted puts his hand on the Bible and he lies. Haley wasn't acquainted with Rubio either. What she did know is that she didn't like the guys leading the Florida Senators campaign, including manager Terry Sullivan, had to run Baird's race against her in 2010. Haley's political consigliere, John Lerner, made it clear when he extended the invitation that Rubio should not bring Sullivan to the dinner. But when Rubio and his wife arrived at the governor's mansion, they were asked into the reception area for refreshments, except Rubio didn't show up. For the next 10 minutes, as the senator's wife made small talk with Haley and her husband, the candidate himself was nowhere to be found. As it turned out, he was still in the foyer, yakking it up with Haley's butler about sports and other topics. When the folks in the reception area caught wind of what was holding Rubio up, Haley's staff were worried that she might be offended, but she was positively charmed. Haley and Rubio bonded like long-lost relatives. Over the course of several hours, they compared notes on experiences in their respective state legislatures. They talked about their young children. They marveled around the similarities of their life stories. Both children of immigrants with humble beginnings, both evangelists for the American dream, both viscerally disturbed by Trump's animus towards people like them. By the time dessert was served, Haley made it clear that she would throw support behind Rubio, but she added a caveat: "I will campaign all across South Carolina with you. I will do whatever it takes to help you beat Trump, but I'm only asking one thing," Haley told Rubio. "I never want to be in the same room as Terry Sullivan." Damn. Very big animus. Very big animus. But see, how well they bond together is concerning about Rubio, because I like Rubio substantially more than I like Nikki Haley in terms of him being, masculine, I guess. Coming off more conservative to me, but if they're so similar, it seems very concerning. Okay. Rubio agreed. Then immediately upon leaving the governor's mansion, he got on his campaign manager and other senior staff on the phone. There was whoops of elation on the other end of the line. Haley's endorsement would come as a shock, so close to the South Carolina primary, and maybe, just maybe, it will help them carry over the state and arrest Trump's momentum. After the celebration died down, Rubio informed them of Haley's ground rule. The line fell silent. "What the hell do you do with this woman?" Rubio asked Sullivan. The next day, Haley phoned Bush to inform him that she would be endorsing Rubio, his former pupil in Florida, and not him. Several people close to Bush described the poll as a low point in his campaign. He hung up incredulously after Haley explained that her priority, more than rewarding friendship, was stopping Trump. The relationship had never recovered. Lamau. So she endorsed a guy she had never met before over her friend, because it was more politically expedient. Awesome. So very telling, again and again, who the fuck she is as a person. In the 72 hours before South Carolina's primary, Haley helped Rubio put on a rock concert across the state. The two of them were joined at events by Tim Scott, who had endorsed Rubio. Here was the future of republicanism: an Indian American governor, a black senator, and a Cuban American presidential candidate joining forces fight back against a frontrunner who was race-baiting and hate-mongering his way to the party nomination as president. Haley took this mission especially personally. I wanted everyone, she said, when endorsing Rubio, that this was going to be and show my parents that this is the best decision they made when coming to America. What the hell did she cut her knee on? Okay, look how small the rally is compared to the Trump rallies. This is probably like 200 people tops. It didn't do much good. Trump romped by double digits in South Carolina's primary, establishing himself as the overwhelming favorite in the race. At this point, Haley's staff counseled her with caution. Trump was emerging as the inevitable Republican nominee, continuing to promote Rubio at his expense, and sticking to policy contrast was one thing. But going after Trump personally, they told her, could prove ruinous for her career. Haley said she understood. But under the bright lights, she became incorrigible. She mocked his failed business ventures. She razzed him for not releasing his tax returns. She accused him of being everything we teach our kids not to do in kindergarten. Most notably, Haley excoriated Trump for failing to denounce KKK leader David Duke. We saw and looked a true hate in the eyes last year in Charleston, Haley told Atlanta crowds. Just before Super Tuesday, I will not stop until we fight a man that chooses not to disavow the KKK. That is not part of our party. This is not who we want as president. After bathing in a raucous ovation that lasted 25 seconds, Haley added, "This is not a Republican Party. That's not who America is. When my parents came here, they came because they knew there is love and acceptance in this country." So again, she's attacking Trump for an invalid criticism. Trump obviously never endorsed the KKK, and even if he did not denounce them, you gotta be fucking kidding me if that's a bad thing in terms of being a big deal. Okay? Trump's not even racist. Chill out. Like, come on, man. 2 weeks later, Rubio was out of the race. Trump had a stranglehold on the party of Lincoln, and Haley was left to grapple with the decisions she had been dogged on for years by a reputation for saying and doing what was expedient. Now she was being punished for singing the animated notes of her political soul. The governor's approval rating among Republicans continued to slide down. Powerful Republicans in Columbia whispered that her career was over. When hit particularly hard, Haley's Lieutenant Governor Henry McMaster had become the first statewide officeholder in Iowa, New Hampshire, or South Carolina to endorse Trump. Once rivals for governor in 2010, Haley and McMaster had become friends. She hired several of his former staffers and was happy to see him elected as lieutenant governor in 2014, but they had a dramatic rupture early in his career. When McMaster had presided over the Senate, refusing to rule on parliamentary question that Haley ordered, she rushed to Facebook and wrote a statement upbraiding him. It was a reckless and wildly disproportionate move, one that permanently soured their relationship. That's McMaster right there. When people describe Haley as lucky, it's because of McMaster, who's unwittingly rescued her career. She kept her head down after Trump won the nomination. When her friend, vice presidential nominee Mike Pence, asked her to introduce him at the 2016 convention, Haley made clear that she would not pay tribute to Trump on national television. And after some back and forth, angered Pence's staff by ultimately declining her determination to stay above the fray, extended to Access Hollywood weekend. When many GOP leaders questioned whether Trump should quit the race, Haley had a good fortune. Friends joke of having a hurricane hit in Florida and South Carolina that weekend. On Election Day 2016, much like then Speaker Paul Ryan and a number of other Republicans who had been outspoken Trump critics expected to have their objections vindicated, instead, Trump won the presidency, leaving Haley in a state of shock. When a friend texted her in dismay, Haley replied, "Cheer up, we just won the governor's races in Vermont, Indiana, North Dakota." Gallows humor aside, Haley was dazed. She had been preparing to campaign as the face of the post-Trump GOP, bookings on the Today Show the morning after Election Day and Meet the Press on that Monday, but it was now futile. She canceled the bookings. To say Haley was a long shot to join the Trump administration would be inaccurate. She had no shot whatsoever. The president-elect remembered her ad hominem insults during the primary campaign. It was overheard more than one time referring to Haley as a bitch. Based, unlike other Republicans who had attacked him, Rick Perry, Lindsey Graham, Rand Paul, Haley had not apologized or come to kiss his ring. Trump had no use for her, ignoring the pleas of Pence to consider her for a prominent role. So again, this is Pence not being a good vice president to Trump, trying to get Nikki Haley into the administration. It was a fucking mess. Then, a few days after the election, Trump called McMaster. He was prepared to give him almost any position in the government that he desired. "Henry, what do you want?" the president-elect asked. "Name it." McMaster told Trump he didn't want to join the administration. He wanted to be governor. "That's it?" Trump replied. "Well, that should be easy. You're already a lieutenant governor." Explaining that it wasn't that simple, McMaster decided to communicate it more directly. "I need Nikki Haley out of the way," McMaster told Trump. "I want you to find a job that she will take." Paste, 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 paste. See, I want Nikki Haley away. Honest pill? Take the honest pill. That's awesome. Okay. Watching as Haley headlined Trump rallies in Pennsylvania the week before Election Day, I was struck by the fine line she was already walking. The final draft of her presidential stump speech was coming along nicely. She would tell how when Trump asked her to become his ambassador to the United Nations, she told him there was 3 conditions. I said, well, I'd been governor. I don't want to work for anybody else. I want something to directly work with you. So it would have to be a cabinet position. And he said, done. What else? I said, well, I'm a policy girl. I want to be in the room when decisions are made. So I need to be on the National Security Council. And he said, done. What else? I said, well, I'm not going to be a wallflower or a talking head. I need to be able to say what I think. And he said, Nikki, that's exactly what I want you to do with this. And he was true to his word from the first to the very last day. After the cheers died down, she would nod waggishingly to the president's callowness. He can always be interesting and build to a real crowd pleaser, telling how Trump came to the UN during an impasse with North Korea over nuclear capacities, and despite his misgivings, denounced Kim Jong-un as Little Rocket Man. Not long after the speech, she added with a mischievous grin, "The Prime Minister of Uganda asked her, so Madame Ambassador, when are we going Whatever. The crux of Haley's speech was an argument that U.S. foreign policy had been an unsung success story for the last 4 years, that America deterred North Korea, bankrupted Iran, confronted China, defended Israel, but the subtext wasn't simply that Trump had overshadowed the accomplishments with his brutish behavior. The subtext was that it didn't need to be this way. The diplomacy and decency are not mutually exclusive. Friends of Haley said that she had been genuinely surprised. Upon joining the administration and immersing herself in the realm of geopolitics, at times, how often the instincts aligned with Trump's on policy. I agree with everything that he's done, she told me in one interview. An assertion that she had walked back only slightly when I mentioned deliberate family separation at the southern border. Perhaps this owes to some shared traits: reflexive distrust of strangers, personal and political insecurity, and a patronage approach to relationships. Danny Danon, who had served along Haley's as Israel's ambassador, remembers being shocked at her idea to host a dinner for diplomats and not only invite those who had voted against America's position at the UN. The European representatives were really upset, Danon told me, but for her, the point was that there was going to be consequences if you didn't show your support. Haley and the Republican Party. We've lost 7 out of the last 8 electoral popular vote elections. That doesn't mean there's something right with them. That means there's something wrong, and we need to fix it. Of course, that shouldn't be confusing for a comprehensive foreign policy framework. Haley struck a relationship with famed diplomat Henry Kissinger while in New York, going to his club for monthly lunches and hosting him at her apartment for dinner on several occasions. When I pressed Kissinger to describe the Haley doctrine, to classify her views in the sweep of modern U.S. policy, he took a long pause. I think I'd rather not get into that question. It's a really good question, and a question I'd like to answer for myself at some point. Whatever the alignment with Haley's ideas, Haley found herself increasingly annoyed by the president's inability to get out of his own way. The more she came to subscribe to the Trumpian view of international affairs, punishing disloyalty, practicing transactionalism, and she came to resent her boss for the petty distractions and self-defeating antics. This formed the thematic spine for Haley's second book, With All Due Respect, Defending America with Grit and Grace, which published a year after her exit from the White House. Not much reading between the lines is necessary. Haley's theory was, you can be tough without being truculent, you can be a nationalist without being a nativist, you can get results without being on Twitter. So what she's saying is basically, we play it safe, and there's no fun. So again, no fun. That's gay. Okay. I hope the Republican Party would leave the anger and focus on the policy and communications. Okay, when I was in the UN, it killed me, Haley, your son. I could not even stomach it when the government shut down, and I was not even at the UN at that point. When it shut down, I looked at the Security Council chamber and saw the ambassadors and their staffs there. I saw that the American ambassador with no staff. Do you know what that says to the world? We can't get our shit together. This was the essence of Haley's presidential pitch, that she can come get America's shit together. Her belief is in herself is almost as strong as the conviction that the people that are running are in the depth. When I asked Nikki Haley whether she thought she could do the job of president, she replied with a startling speed, "Yeah, of course I do." Okay. This self-confidence isn't a revelation to anyone in Trump's orbit. Despite being 230 miles from the White House, she made no secret of her opinion that Trump's government was being run into the ground by incompetent egomaniacs. Haley would sneak into Washington unannounced and find an audience with the president over the objections of people like John Kelly and Rex Tillerson, pleading a case separate from theirs. She would back-channel with foreign governments and with U.S. officials in a manner that made her appear to be the Secretary of State, which caused Tillerson to vent on a few occasions on that bitch. Tillerson declined to comment on the story. John Bolton, who also came to detest Haley during their time in the administration, wrote in their memoir about Trump telling the story of Tillerson calling Haley nothing but a cunt to her face. That Haley was one of the few high-ranking women in the administration. This was at a time cartoonishly misogynistic, did not win her any friends, and given that the 40-something woman was something new to the national security world, her only foreign policy experience coming from pitching tax subsidies to German automakers, Haley's cockiness was bound to put a target on her back. But what made Haley so hated was the fact that she played the game better than they did. No one else in the administration could get away with what she did, so privately critical of Trump while not even appearing publicly at odds with him. Unlike Kelly and Tillerson and others, she never felt the need to plot behind Trump's back because she knew that he would listen to her. Some people approach their job from the perspective of wanting to control outcomes. H.R. McMaster, no relation to Henry McMaster, Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina, who served as Trump's national security advisor, told me, "I think that in the case of serving a very disruptive, maybe the most unconventional president in American history, there are some people who wanted to control the president's decisions, and they got confused on who owns the foreign policy." So reading these few paragraphs, you can very obviously tell that Nikki Haley wasn't any better than John Bolton or John Kelly or any of these establishmentarian politicians that were trying to subvert and control Donald Trump. In fact, she was worse than them because she believed the same things they did, but was more sociopathic, more cloak and dagger, was more able to work under the pretense of being pro-Trump and subverting his movement than these other faggots could. So that just goes to show, not only does she maybe come out as more pro-Trump than John Bolton, but she hates Trump even more, but she just doesn't look like that because she's even more sociopathic and covers it up even more than John Bolton ever did before. Henry McMaster, I think, H.R. McMaster, a retired 4-star general, became one of Haley's few allies in the administration. He said, "What set her apart from the embrace of some unconventional arguments that broke from the consensus of the National Security Council, including his own positions, and her advocacy of positions that were closer to Trump's. She understood what her role was, and that made her effective," McMaster said. Some of the most disheveled feathers came from inside the president's office. Once Mike Pence had been a friend of Haley's, even a confidant. The former governors could speak candidly about the White House drama and coordinate messages, but tension surfaced in year 2, owing to a certain wariness about some of the vice president's team watching Haley operate. While Pence was stuck cleaning up messes in D.C., or more often denying that there was any mess at all, she was winning a lot of glowing media reviews, hosting exclusive salons, and charming big donors in her Manhattan apartment, all while owning the Israel issue in no ways Republicans could even dream of. The likelihood of the Pence-Haley primary fight in 2024 had long been murmured along the West Wing when Haley resigned, keeping her head down for all but 5 minutes before she ran, maneuvering toward a future run. The vice president's team went on high alert, though things escalated permanently when Nick Ayers, the longtime Haley advisor, who had spent 2017 and 2018 serving as Pence's chief of staff, like I said before I read this, big brain, followed her out of the door following the midterm elections, turning down the job as White House chief of staff and making it known that he would be with Haley, not Pence, in 2024. Ayers' protege, strategist Austin Chambers, is said to be the leading candidate to be her campaign manager. Haley's team denied this, and both Ayers and Chambers declined to comment. So that's very interesting to note. So this Nick Ayers guy helped Haley, then jumped on the Pence bandwagon. But then as soon as Haley seemed like more promising long term, he went back on the Haley train instead of sticking with Mike Pence for 2024. Very telling. And you know what? Backing up Nikki Haley is probably a better bet than Mike Pence, because Mike Pence is fucked right now in terms of running in 24. A bad situation got worse in the middle of 2019 when the president started speculating, first in small conversations and then loosely in front of larger audiences, about the prospect of replacing Pence with Haley on the 2020 ticket. Haley, who was more popular than his vice president, Trump would say, and she could do wonders with his deficits with suburban women. Then in July of 2019, both Pence and Haley were invited to address a mega donor retreat in Aspen, Colorado. To the surprise of some attendees, the UN ambassador was given a better slot, delivering a keynote dinner address while the vice president spoke at breakfast the next morning. Mark Short, a staunch Pence loyalist who replaced Ayers as chief of staff, viewed this as an act of war. He believed Haley's team was looking for ways to upstage the vice president. According to multiple people familiar with the discussions, Short warned Pence that Haley was coming for him. Both men declined to comment for this story, though. None of this was surprising, given her long history of making political enemies. Everyone who has ever run against Haley has wound up alienated from her, and everyone who has considered a run against Haley from her own home state competitor, Senator Tim Scott, to the Trump-era diplomat who outranked her, Mike Pompeo, knows exactly that they'd be getting themselves into. She is as charming as she is cold-blooded, the sort of politician others politicians love to hate. I kick it with a smile, she told me, nodding knowingly. I've always kicked with a smile. Which is so fucked up on so many levels. These people relish in the fact that they're all fucking sociopaths and psychos, and they're all crazy, and they all lie, and the means to an end is nothing but the common thing that they do all the time. In terms of rationalizing their decisions, they're constantly making backwards deals. They're constantly lying to each other for more power. And you know what? Haley's semi-open about it too. It's so weird. And these politicians are like, man, she's so good. That's not a valuable thing. That's like if Ted Bundy said, man, Jeffrey, yeah, he's such a good killer, man. He's awesome. He's so slick with it. It's like, no, that's terrible. That's awful. Wow, man, Nikki knows how to manipulate Trump very well. It's like, come on, dude. Are you kidding? Okay. Haley said she's not intimidated by the potential ugliness of a presidential race. If you can get through South Carolina, you can get through anything, because it's literally the most brutal battlefield you'll ever face. But that theory will be tested. Wait until the old affair rumors come back soaring into life. Wait until photos of her pilgrimage to a Sikh temple in India, clad in ritualistic attire, with a head cover and red bindi on her forehead, go viral on far-right websites. Wait until the once fringe elements of the GOP that are now very much mainstream begin spinning conspiracy theories about who she is and where she's from and what her real plans are. Haley on the state of the GOP right now. This is rock bottom. We've lost the House, we've lost the Senate, we've lost the White House. We had one of the worst days in modern history. I'm frustrated that we're in this place, but I'm not going to let this define the Republican Party. Oh my god. Sorry. Okay. Nothing will be off limits. Haley is hyped by donors principally because they see her as working magic with suburban women. Reconnecting the party got the demographic that Trump drove away. But Haley's gender will almost certainly be used against her, perhaps in uncertain ways. Corey Lewandowski, the former Trump campaign advisor, had been overheard advising South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem to run against Haley as the hotter, Trumpier, real American governor. Yo, based. So far, yeah, that seems true. I personally believe Kristi Noem is not only, I think, younger than Nikki Haley by a little bit. She's better looking than Nikki Haley. She's white. That's an advantage. She's not an immigrant. That's an advantage insofar as she doesn't feel the need to go after Confederate shit and other stuff like that. South Carolina is a better state than South Dakota in terms of regional effect. Well, who cares? And she is definitely more MAGA than Nikki Haley, as well as she's probably more conservative overall. Now, meanwhile, Haley has had fewer loyalists to protect her than ever before. Tim Pearson, who had won renown for his management of Haley's gubernatorial campaign, had spent years as her top aide. It is no longer inside the circle. The reason Haley blew up after learning that Pearson was secretly dating her assistant, something she viewed as a breach of trust. Even though the two are now married and have a child, Haley knows her paranoia is a problem. I don't trust because I've never been given a reason to trust, but there's really no solving it. Perhaps the greatest threat to Nikki Haley is Fox News After Dark. There's a reason she went on Laura Ingraham's show on January 25th, a few weeks after blaming Trump for the siege of the Capitol, and said we should give the man a break. This is one of my latest Haley-induced whiplash. It made, by my count, 3 distinct stances on Trump, in which, on the span of 6 weeks, she had never had personal relationships with Fox stars the way that other Republicans do. When Tucker Carlson went after Haley last summer, responding to her empathetic remarks about George Floyd's murder by declaring, "What Nikki Haley does best is moral blackmail." The entire 2024 field took notice. Carlson has clearly taken a disliking to Haley. What if he or Sean Hannity, or a combination of these or other right-wing voices, make it their mission to take her down? Haley rolled her eyes asked about Carlson. "I've dealt with people like him all my life," she said. Haley did not elaborate, but she did not need to. She's dealt with men, white men, race-baiting white men all her life. The campaign, she implied, will not be any different. Resentment check? Yo, resentment moment? Okay. But it could be that there's a path of least resistance that Haley could yet pursue. No matter her passion in denouncing the president during a January 12th interview, no matter her certainty that he was in the wrong and crippled and the party was moving on without him, there's still time for Haley to recover. A campaign launch is 2 years off. She can still work to rekindle the warm relationship with Trump, persuading him and his family that she just got carried away. She can pretend that Marjorie Taylor Greene is just some harmless GOP backbencher. She can cozy up to the heavyweights in Fox News and convince them to pull their punches. She can pour her time and energy into denouncing those damn socialists in the Democratic Party, carrying forth a partisan warrior queen, crossing her fingers and hoping everyone from the redheads to the Republican National Committee remembers the momentary lapse. Or she can say whatever she wants to say. She can cast her lot with Liz Cheney. She can campaign as herself. She can prove once and for all that her parents made the right choice by coming to the United States of America. Hoping for a hint, I asked Haley on January 12th, does she still consider Trump a friend? Friend, she answered, is a loose term. Wow. Interesting. That's the entire fucking article, guys. That's what I just read to you. That took me forever. This took me forever to read. Jeez. An hour and a half. It took me about an hour and a half to read this whole thing. And this is the most complex political article I've ever seen. Okay. Good for them for actually bothering to write something of substance. For once. Thank you, Politico. I like reading it. Big pictures, big words. I love it. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But yeah, that's what it is. Now I don't want to talk about it too much, in part because I honestly feel that Nikki Haley is borderline sociopathic, and I say that with loose terms. I think she's a liar. I think she's opportunistic. I don't think she's principled. And a lot of people give shit to Donald Trump for not being a principled conservative. But honestly, he's a lot more consistent, or at least a lot more emotionally consistent than is Nikki Haley. Trump has something in him that makes him based, okay? Whereas Nikki Haley does not have it. It does not exist. She went from Tea Party to not Tea Party to Tea Party to MAGA to not MAGA. Where the fuck are you, Nikki Haley? Come on. Okay, and it's not really that she's an immigrant or that she's brown. I don't really care. But the thing is, though, is that she cares, and that's the problem. A person who's an immigrant, yes, that could help with certain demographics, but it would hurt with the other ones to an extent. Let's also keep in mind that Nikki Haley also views herself as an outsider, that people don't like her. She has a low-key resentment for white working men. It's what it seems to me, and she, is very often calling people racist and shit. I mean, just not cool. If Nikki Haley's the leader of the movement, there's no future for America First. There's no future for paleocons in the foreseeable future, because she is not embodying the stuff that we need in our party. And her record has shown time and time again, she's backstabbed countless people, used people for what they are, tools, threw Jeb Bush under the bus, Marco Rubio, all that, just for her own political gain. She's pretty evil, and she must be stopped. Now, that's me reading Nikki Haley's Time for Choosing, right? But let's keep in mind, guys, what Richard Barrett said in his live stream. I heard it recently, and it said that Nikki Haley's going to fundraisers, to big donors and asking them to give her money because she's definitely going to run in 4 years, as well as she's definitely going to, it's a predicament. Will she go left of center right, or will she go center right, or will she go MAGA? And rest assured, anything she does will not be completely genuine to what she believes, because she's a pragmatist at heart, and a pretty good one at that. And that's a problem for us, right-wingers, solid Trump people. And, I mean, come on. Now, in terms of the article, I think it was pretty well written. A lot of bias, of course. It was a leftist that wrote this, yes, but I could more or less parse through it and glean through the facts. She has a lot of dirt in her, whether that be the tax stuff, the IRS stuff, the affairs, a lot of material to cover. And rest assured, I do think I will do a Rhino Hunter series. I think it's called, Hunting Rhinos or something? A show where I cover different politicians that I think are rhinos, neocons.